Video games lie. Unless you're under the age of 5, that's a fact that probably won't surprise many of you. However, while no reasonable person has a problem with this kind of concealment, some games take their sweet little lies even further, by fooling you into believing they possess a feature that simply isn't there. Some games lie by giving you an illusion of choice, some lie about having multiple endings, and some lie to fool you into thinking your actions have consequences. But no matter what the case may be, one thing is always true. The most dishonest titles do it right to your face. You just don't happen to notice it because they know how to disguise those lies with a clever illusion of the feature they promised you. Watch out for the deceptions in the following games. You don't want to fall for their sneaky schemes. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 times video games lied to your face. Number 10. No one actually dies. Little Hope. Little Hope is considered to be the worst title in Supermassive Games' Dark Pictures anthology. While not everyone agrees, the reason for this, for those who were disappointed, is... Spoiler alert. I'm gonna spoil the game. I'm just giving you a second. Okay, let's do it. The reason for this is that the game's ending reveals that none of your choices actually mattered. The big spooky twist of Little Hope is that all but one character were just figments of the imagination of the protagonist, Andrew, and your hard fight for their survival was happening entirely in his head as a means of processing the guilt of killing the other characters in a car crash. So what's the point of keeping them alive then? You might be thinking the more of Andrew's imaginary friends that you save, the better he copes with his loss. But you'd be wrong. There are only 2 endings in the game, and they're determined by whether or not you were nice to the only other real character in the story, a random stranger named Vince. How you treat Vince determines whether he calls the cops on you or not at the end of the story. All that struggle with survival and fending off demons? Completely irrelevant. When only a few minutes of your 5-hour game matter, the rug pull probably wasn't gonna be worth it. Number 9. But Thou Must. Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest is a series of JRPG games that are especially popular in Japan. The franchise has a long history that precedes some of even the other bigger JRPG series you might have heard more of, and it's also had a hand in establishing many of the genre's tropes, including one that's pretty annoying: fake choices. It all started with the first Dragon Quest game, in which a princess asks the player if they love her, and if they answer no, she tells them, "But thou must," and asks them the question again. This little gag became the foundation for Dragon Quest's tradition of fake choices. Ever since, every Dragon Age title has included a yes or no question that, no matter how you answer, the game bullies you into giving it the answer it needs anyway. This charade has gone on for so long that even though this cliche can get pretty annoying in other franchises, most Dragon Quest players have grown to enjoy its appearance in the series. It's a tradition of lies and deceit, but a tradition nonetheless. Number 8. Siding with LaCroix, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Due to its rushed development, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is missing a lot of its planned features, one of which relates to the game's endings. Although there is technically at least one ending for each faction, in reality only half of them can be counted as actual endings. The other half just lie to you about providing an alternative narrative, as is the case with the most infamous of Vampire's epilogues, Siding with LaCroix. LaCroix, the Prince of Camarilla, who spends the entire game ordering you around, can be made into a potential ally, despite his betrayal of your character. When you come to his tower to end his unlife, you can decide to join forces with him, with the idea of making the Camarilla stronger. However, this simply doesn't happen, not because LaCroix betrays you or you betray him, but because halfway through the ending cutscene, the two of you explode. Yes, the game simply kills off your character as soon as you make the choice to spare him, because you're not actually supposed to side with him. That and the developers probably just didn't have enough time to give this path a proper ending. Number 7. Leave Batman to Die, Batman Arkham City. The story of the Batman Arkham games is pretty linear, so you don't really expect to be able to make any plot-defining choices throughout any of your playthroughs. However, when Batman Arkham City throws you a bone in its Catwoman-focused DLC, which seamlessly integrates into the events of the main story, it could at least follow up on the premise instead of fooling you into thinking you might finally have some say in the outcome. In the DLC, when Catwoman finally manages to empty the vault that she's been trying to raid since she wound up in Arkham City, she's faced with a decision. She can either leave the super prison with the loot or go back to save the captured Batman from certain death, except there's no real choice. The moment you leave with the money, the credits roll and the game immediately rewinds you back to the crossroads so that you can save Batman. It's understandable that Rocksteady wanted you to save the person who makes the entire narrative of Arkham City possible, but if they're already adding a choice, they could elaborate on the consequences of your actions a little, or at the very least add a short cutscene showing the aftermath. Otherwise, the choice isn't really a choice, is it? Number 6. Sacrifice yourself. Saints Row 4. There are 2 things that can be said about Saints Row 4. 1, it does not take itself too seriously, and 2, it doesn't take other games particularly seriously either. Saints Row 4 is filled with little gags and references to other gaming franchises, like romance options parodying the relationship system in Mass Effect, and a mission making fun of Call of Duty. Naturally, the list of jokes made at the expense of the gaming industry also includes a jab at the trope of fake choices. It happens in the mission where the player attempts to storm Zinyak's mothership in order to save hacker Matt Miller. As you navigate through the ship, you'll eventually come across a room where Zinyak gives you a choice. You can continue to fight and save Matt, or if you trust to Zinyak's word, you can give up, and in exchange, Zinyak will spare humanity from his conquest. Of course, Zinyak isn't to be trusted, and the moment you step through the give up door, your character is disintegrated. You get a game over, and you're immediately brought back to your last checkpoint. Well, the choice was clearly a joke, and I guess if you fell for it, the joke's on you. Number 5. Yes and no. Pokemon. Just like the previously mentioned Dragon Quest, Pokemon is notorious for including nonsensical moments of choice throughout the games that don't actually change anything at all. Other trainers will ask if you're ready to fight or ready to start your adventure, and it doesn't really matter how you reply, the game will eventually bully you into saying what it needs you to say. It's mostly done as a joke, but sometimes the fakeness of your choices can actually prove to be detrimental to your experience, like in the case of this one deceptively serious decision in Pokemon X and Y, in which you can choose between a gold nugget and a Master Ball as your reward, only to be given both of them anyway. Come on, Pokemon, some stakes and consequences every now and then couldn't hurt anybody. If somebody really wants to miss out on their opportunity of getting a Master Ball, then let them. Otherwise, what's the point of asking the question? Number 4. Siding with Gortash, Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 owes a huge part of its popularity to the amount of thought put into the player's potential actions. Even the most outrageous solution to a problem is likely to be acknowledged by the game in some way, which is why it's pretty disappointing that there's one rather major decision that Baldur's Gate 3 won't let you make in its final act, even though the game lies to you about the option being on the table. Spoiler alert, but in Act 3, and I'm talking slowly again, one of the tyrannical antagonists, Lord Gortash, asks you if you want to team up and rule the world together. If you play as the Dark Urge, Gortash even reveals himself to be your friend from before you lost your memory, and says that you were meant to team up from the get-go. Because Gortash seems to be genuinely interested in a partnership, you might be tempted to accept his offer and see where it goes, especially on your evil playthrough. However, the choices make no impact on the story whatsoever, as immediately after you join forces, the Chosen of Bane is killed in a freak accident, trying to reach the Netherbrain. Well, so much for being evil buddies. Number 3. 3 endings, Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3's original ending is considered to be one of the worst endings in the history of video games ever. It's easy to see why, as it's essentially rendered every single decision you've made as Shepard across 3 games completely pointless while giving you this illusion of choice, which you know isn't really a choice. The extended cut and the Legendary Edition fixed the ending a little bit, but for those who witnessed the original, they know exactly how disappointing it was to find out all your hard work culminated in a random ghost child handing you the solution to your problems on a silver platter, as though you never had to make all those sacrifices at all. No matter what you did throughout the game, in the finale, you always got to choose between 3 color-coded endings, in which you activated the Crucible and destroyed the Reapers, controlled the Reapers, or assimilated the Reapers. Now, those endings sound pretty distinct, but the cutscene that played afterwards looked exactly the same, save for one tiny thing that's individual to each. But the worst part was still that the endings had nothing to do with how you played Mass Effect prior to that decision. The stakes have never been lower. Number 2. No one will actually remember that. The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead games, as well as the rest of Telltale's releases, managed to become so successful in no small part thanks to the choices you made throughout them. The gravity of the supposed consequences of your actions, plus that blank will remember this text that comes up on screen whenever you do make a decision, keeps you on edge and makes you feel like you're making choices that are going to alter the paths of your characters' lives. But nothing could be further from the truth. No one will actually remember that. The reality of Telltale games is that they're actually incredibly linear, and the choices you make never really affect any major points of the plot. Characters you've been trying to save the entire game will die anyway if the plot demands it. Similarly, your attempt to influence them to act in a certain way will magically disappear the moment they need to shoot someone in the head to add some end-of-season cliffhanger to the mix. Of course, this doesn't mean that the story isn't also gripping and exciting, but knowing that the game is going to take you where it wants to take you anyway might take some of the fun out of it for some gamers. Number 1. Fake stakes. Detroit Become Human. Detroit Become Human, like other David Cage projects, has been criticized for having a rather generic storyline, but it's still a wholly entertaining narrative experience. Your choices in the game feel impactful, and the quick-time events during action sequences create a sense of suspense. Until, of course, you learn that they are, in fact, entirely pointless. As it turns out, the apparent life or death stakes in even the most intense moments in Detroit Become Human are just an illusion. The main cast of characters can't die until the third act of the game, meaning no matter how badly you mess up the QuickTime events, there's no real consequences. Connor, who can fall off a building, get shot, and run over by cars, comes back alive all the time thanks to Cyberlife providing him with a new body. Marcus and Kara, the other two protagonists who don't enjoy those same privileges, happen to avoid all their failings thanks to some convenient plot armor. All in all, the only punishment you get for not trying to keep your characters alive in the first half of the game is the hilarity of watching them fail miserably at the most basic of physical tasks, which is honestly more of a reward when you think about it. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other times that video games have lied to you. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald or Twitch where I'm Tempetress, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.